Welcome to Brand Builders TV. Deep dive topics, tools and resources brought to you by global thought leaders from within the Brand Builders Club. This show gives you access to the strategies that you can use to move forward with ease and flow in every area of your life and business. In today's show, Philippa is going to take you through part 1 of this 4-part series, From Grief to Gratitude. Having come through the trauma of losing her father to suicide, Philippa has come full circle to sow the seeds of happiness with her new brand, The Wellbeing Gardener. In this first session, Philippa is going to give you the strategies that she used to go from angry, grief-stricken and no-hoper to a thriving wellbeing therapist, helping hundreds of people to pivot their lives into joy and gratitude. Learn it, model it, and get shit done. Let's go.
And welcome to Brand Builders TV. My name is Philippa Bennett, otherwise known as the Wellbeing Gardener, planting the seeds of joy and gratitude. And this is the first in a 4-part series entitled From Grief to Gratitude. So, as I said, I am the Wellbeing Gardener, and the title of this series actually does what it says on the tin. So, From Grief to Gratitude. It's a fairly self-explanatory title. And I'm going to teach you, or I'm going to share with you, the strategies that I used to go from grief, and I was in a really terrible, down low, down on my luck, grief-stricken part of my life, how I went from there to now happy, healthy, well-being therapist, full of joy, full of love, full of gratitude. Now, I'm going to start you off with a question. Hi, Sally. I'm going to start you off with a question. Now, it could be a pretty tricky question for some people, so bear with me. And it could be quite an easy question for some, could be quite difficult for others. But that question is, and I'd really love it if you could type in the comments below what your answer to that question is. How would you define happiness? Tell me in the comments, how would you define happiness? Let's see, how would I define happiness? I would define happiness as freedom. I would define happiness as, for me, being in the countryside is very important for me. Happiness is also things like, for some it could be material possessions, for some it could be monetary. What Sally's saying, Sally, feeling light. Oh, that's excellent. Thank you, Sally. Yeah, feeling light, feeling free, feeling at ease. So, anyone else? How would you define happiness? What would be your... Hi, Greg. Hi. So I was just saying the question, how would you define happiness? Uplifted. Yes, Sally. Yep. Open spaces. Yeah. That's also a big one for me. Being in the countryside makes me very happy. Okay, some good answers there. It's a quite tricky question to define, isn't it? It's quite difficult for some people to really define what happiness really is. And the point being, it's really as subjective and as individual as we are all individual. And it really depends on the values and what you really deem important in your life. And that could be different for absolutely every single human being on the planet. It's as subjective as we are all subjective. Now, let me tell you a little bit of a story about where I'm coming from. So obviously it's called From Grief to Gratitude. So I kind of know what I'm talking about. So a little bit of backstory about me. I'll take you back about 30 years when I was a teenager. I was a pretty angry teenager. I was very frustrated. I was always very angry. I was always throwing temper tantrums. And I really wanted to get out of the parental home. I wanted to go and do my own thing. And when I was 18, I did manage to do that. I went to university, I got away, I threw myself into partying like never before. I really enjoyed going out and drinking. And I eventually got very much into the rave scene as well, into free parties, as we called them in Devon. And yeah, I threw myself into partying and to trying to enjoy life as much as I could, which in hindsight, it wasn't the way to do it. And I ended up after university in a job that I absolutely hated. And I cannot stress this enough. It was the worst job I've ever had in my life. I was working in a call centre. I won't say what kind of company it is, because if you are from the West Country and I say what kind of company it is, you will know the company, and it was as bad to work for as the reputation that it had. And I used to go to work in the mornings crying. I hated it that much. I would go out at the weekends, go out partying, go out drinking, go to raves. Monday morning I would normally have off. I had the most amount of Mondays off in the whole company. Wednesday would be the dip during the week, the Wednesday blues, to come back up again to go partying the next weekend. And then one Thursday night, much like any other Thursday night, I was sitting at home with my then partner and a couple of friends. We were having a couple of cans of lager, playing Nintendo 64. That tells you how long ago it was. And I got a phone call. My partner answered the phone, and I could tell by his face at the time there was something really, really, really wrong. And the phone call basically informed us that my father had committed suicide. And I went from being miserable and unhappy to completely broken. I have to say, I was absolutely, completely broken. And it was the worst time of my life. The 2 weeks after we had the news, the 2 weeks after he did the deed, I basically just laid on my mum's sofa and cried for 2 weeks. And then a bit of normality crept back in. I went back to work, back to that job I hated. And I really then threw myself into partying, really, really. So I partied as hard and as often as I could. But it got to a point where I thought, this can't go on. I cannot keep trying to get rid of these painful, dark, horrible, grief-ridden feelings by drinking and taking recreational drugs and really ignoring what was going on. And I thought the best thing for me to do would be to move to Lanzarote, which I did. I had a friend who was working there, and I thought a change of scenery, change of life, change of everything would do me good. But the problem was that the grief was still with me, the happiness I was chasing was in front of me, and I was just chasing it, and it was just moving further and further away. And I did that for a good few years. Lived in Lanzarote, I moved to Germany, I moved to Australia, I moved back to Germany, I moved back to Australia, every time thinking, this time it's the right thing to do. This time it's going to make me happy. This time I'm going to find that happiness and my life is going to get better. But that grief was still inside me, and I could actually describe it. At the time I started my homeopathic process, because I am a homeopath and a nutritional therapist as well, and I went into a homeopathic process at one point, which I will get to later, and my homeopath asked me to describe my grief, and I could describe it. It was a big black sticky sludgy ball sitting in my guts, and I'd been carrying that around the world with me, and it had really been stopping me from getting happy. Right now I'm in a really good place, so we'll come out of that nasty, deep, sludgy nastiness. I basically at one point realised that I was doing it wrong. I was running around the world chasing happiness. The grief was running around the world with me, and it was all wrong. So I've got another question for you, which I'd like you to write in the comments your answer to this, because this question is also as subjective and individual as we all are. So how would you personally, how would you describe grief? What if I say grief to you, what does grief mean to you? Let's see if we get any comments coming up. There's a few general themes that always come up, things like sadness, being upset, crying. They're the standard grief responses. It's a really strange subject, because it's something we're all going to go through in our lives. There's no escaping it whatsoever. It's something that everybody has to deal with, but it seems to be something that you don't really talk a lot about. It's not something that people come forward and talk about. So what's Sally putting here? Yeah, extreme sadness. Absolutely, extreme sadness. It's such an awful, dark feeling, isn't it? Has anybody else got any thoughts on how they would define grief? It's difficult, isn't it? It's not as easy as you think. And if you're watching on the replay, please do put your comments under the video. I will come back and check them. That would be great if you could comment. Yeah, uncontrollable cry. Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting, Sally, because that's what I would say to my homeopath, that this ball of black sludgy grief would occasionally just come up. It would be like vomiting grief, which sounds really awful, but it came out of nowhere sometimes. It would come up and choke me in the throat. Yeah, really spontaneously comes up. That's right. Dark and heavy weight. Yeah, exactly. I think that's Sammy. Is that you, Sammy? Dark and heavy weight. Yeah, exactly. Darkness, and the colour black is something that really, you know, we all wear black to a funeral, most of us do. Black is a really grief associated colour, isn't it? Yeah, some good answers there. So at this point, I'd actually like, if you're able to, can you get a piece of paper and a pen? Because I'd like you to write down some answers to some questions I've got for you. And if you're going to follow me on all 4 of the episodes, this would be really handy, because then you'll be able to look back at them as we go through the process over the next couple of weeks. So if you've got a piece of paper and a pen, oh, hi Greg, as yourself and as brand builders, Greg and Greg. So yeah, if you can grab a piece of paper and a pen, that would be great. If not, just come back and watch this later when you've got a piece of paper and a pen, or just reflect on the questions later. Because I've got 4 questions that I'd like to ask you to reflect upon. So the first question, this is personal for you. Now, if you feel comfortable, it would be really great if you could type it in the comments. If you don't feel comfortable sharing it, because it can be a little bit personal, then just write it down on your piece of paper. But question number 1 is, what is it that makes you happy personally? What are the things that make you happy in life? So I might have mentioned, for me, it was being in nature. I have to have nature around me. If I'm in the city for too long, I need to get out of there, and I need to get out into open spaces. Music is huge part of my life. I absolutely cannot live without music. Music takes me back to happy memories, takes me back to not so happy memories sometimes, but it's really hugely important part of my life. Food makes me happy. I absolutely Sally agrees with me. Yes, nature, absolutely, and proven to improve your mental health by the boffins in coats. So it's a really important, should be an important part of everybody's life. But yeah, food really makes me happy as well. Taste and smell, and preparing it, eating it. Food is really important for me. Good. So hopefully you've got a few things written down there. Quality time with loved ones, absolutely. And that's a really important part of mental health as well, isn't it? Having your community around you to keep your spirits up at times. What have we got from Sally here? Seeing someone's eyes light up with understanding when I share a concept. Yeah, that's a really good one. Thank you, Sally. Yeah, I really like that. That's great. Okay, so let's go on to question number 2. If you haven't got any answers down on your piece of paper, you can come back and reflect on it later. So question number 2. Why is it that those things make you happy? So it's kind of a tricky thing to think about, but why do those things make you happy? So for me, it's feelings. So being in nature, being outside in peace and quiet, it brings medically as well, I know what's going on. But inside me, my systems come right down. My nervous system is calmed. Stresses tend to float away. Seeing the green in nature, even actually in the winter, being in nature, that does it for me as well. Hey, hi Lubna, thank you for joining us. We're just doing some questions, so Lubna, grab some paper and pen, we're doing some questions. So what is it that makes, what feeling do you get? Why do those things make you happy? Write that down on your piece of paper. Okay, now I've got another third question. This might be a bit tricky for some people. How much of the things that you've got written down, what's Sally saying, we'll just say here, satisfied feeling, being present in time, yes. Ready with pen and paper. I'll just recover for Lubna. The first question was, what makes you happy, you personally? And the second question is, why those things make you happy? The third question is, how much are those things that make you happy influenced by other people? That's a tricky question. I'll give you an example of what I mean. So when I'd finished school, I did my GCSEs and I left at 16. I went to college, And I went and did computer studies, which I have no regrets about because it turned out very good for my life and my career up to a certain point. But I actually wanted to stay at school and do A-levels. I wanted to do, I think, maths, physics and French or something like that. Yeah, Lugness's spending time with friends and family, very popular one. And I wanted to stay at school and do my A-levels. My boyfriend at the time wanted me to go to college instead because he was a couple of years older and he didn't want me being at school with kids. And I went to college to please him. I thought I was making myself happy by making him happy, but in hindsight, that really wasn't the case. So are there any things in your list that are on your list because they're influenced by other people? In the past, their response was everything. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, not so much. Yeah, it comes with age, I think, as well. But yeah. So just have a think about that. Are there any things on that list influenced by other people? And the fourth question, to round these 4 questions off, how different would your list be if you weren't influenced by other people? If those people had no influence on you whatsoever, if you had no friends and family to worry about, or you just didn't care, 100% didn't care what they thought, would your list be any different? So write that down or share in the comments with me. And have a think about that over the next week or so before we come to episode 2, because we will be reflecting on that a bit further on. So what I'm really getting at here is, if we go back to the grief side of things, you've got these things on your list that make you happy. Now that could be anything. As I said, it's subjective as everyone is individual. But grief, if grief is undealt with, if it's still sitting there, if it's that sludgy toxic ball in your guts that just hasn't moved, that can actually hinder you from being able to enjoy those things on your list 100%. You might think, yeah, it makes me happy, but you've still got this kind of dodgy feeling that's not really allowing you to 100% enjoy life and to get further in those things that you enjoy doing. And that knock-on effect, that can have a knock-on effect on all aspects of your life, on many, many aspects of your life. So let's go back for a second to that original question, defining happiness. How would you define happiness? Now, in my experience, through my practice as being a homeopath, there are some general themes that people really want in their lives to improve their lives, to feel happier. The first theme that tends to come up really, really often is freedom. So I think Sally mentioned being free, being at ease, being in open space. And that's a really, really important one, is to feel freer. Now, freedom, that can mean many things to different people. The other thing that comes up quite often in my practice is less pain. Now that could be mental pain, that could be physical pain, so that's not feeling as unwell as you possibly feel. And being unwell is not just having an illness, it is also going through emotional pain. Material and financial is also a big thing for most people. And a lot of people, when you start to work on yourself, people sort of say, oh, well, material stuff is not important in life. But actually, I have a slightly different opinion on that, because you need money in this world. You can't live without it. Now, money doesn't buy happiness. Everybody knows that. But it does help. If you have the money to do the things that nourish your soul, then that helps. So finance and material worth is something that does come up in people's sort of happiness plans. And the other thing that I've noticed in my practice as well is inner peace. So that's basically, if I think about some patients I have had who've gone through some very traumatic experiences, myself going through traumatic experience, you've got the chatter in your head of this thing that's always kind of in the background. It's not loud, but it's kind of quiet in the back of your head, always nagging at you. I can hear it all the time. And that's, that inner peace isn't there, and it's quieting that chatter that helps people to get happier, basically. Now, at this point, I'm going to throw a spanner in the works, and I'm going to say to you that grief as a concept, as a trauma, I don't think, in my humble opinion, over my years of practice and working on myself, grief, I don't think is something you can ever really get over. Now, that's something that some people might not agree with, but I don't think you can ever really, really get over grief or a trauma or a large loss in your life. I think it's always going to be there. There's always going to be a certain amount of sadness about it. There's always going to be some, let's say, negative feelings about it. But the idea is to get to a level of acceptance, to get to a level of peace about it, and not really to make it go away, because you're never going to make it go away. You're never going to make it unhappen. So unfortunately, if you're looking for a program over the next 4 weeks where you think I'm going to completely get over my grief, that's not what is going to happen. I'm going to really just take you on the journey of being able to come more to terms with the grief so that you can have a better life. Now, I want you to use your paper and your pen again now. So I've got 4 concepts that I think are mainly impacted by when you have an undealt with or trauma or grief that's sitting inside you. There are other aspects of life as well, but I've just narrowed it down to 4 just for now. Now, it'd be really great if you could share it in the comments. You don't have to again, because it could be too personal, but I've got 4 headings that I'd like you to write on your piece of paper. The first heading is health. So by health, I mean, I don't just mean your physical health, whether you're ill or not. I mean mental health, I mean body, if you're happy with your weight or not, or if you would rather be fitter or not, that kind of thing. So that encompasses everything to do with health. That's heading number 1, if you just write that on your piece of paper. The second one is relationships. Now, by relationships, I mean relationship with yourself, relationship with your spouse, with your partner, with your friends and family, that kind of thing, even maybe with your work colleagues. That's your second heading, relationships. The third heading is livelihood. Now, by livelihood, I don't mean just money. By livelihood, I mean your job, your career, what you do to bring income into your life. That's the third heading as livelihood. And the fourth one, if you could write this down on your piece of paper, is finance. So finance, and by finance obviously I mean money. Okay, now if you don't mind sharing the comments, that would be great. If you don't want to, just write it on your piece of paper to refer back to in the later episodes. But I want you to write on a scale of 1 to 10, so 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest, 10 being the best. Write on a scale of 1 to 10 how happy you are with your health. So if you don't mind sharing, if you could put in the comments health and then a scale of 1 to 10. So that could be any aspect of health. You don't need to share which aspect of health that it is, but how happy are you with your health? Is anybody willing to share publicly? Health, 8. Oh, Lubna, that is really good. That's great. I'd have to say I'm about a 5 or a 6, because I could probably do with losing a few pounds. Health, 9. Wow, Sally, that is really, really great. Anybody else? Greg, are you happy with your health? I'm pretty healthy, but I could probably do with losing a few pounds. Okay, good, that's the first one. So let's say relationships. If you're happy to share, write relationships and give me a scale of 1 to 10. How happy are you with your relationships? Sally, I feel awesome. I feel awesome reading your comments, Sally. I'm feeling your energy. It's brilliant. I get that from Lubna as well when we're in a meeting. Lubna's really full of energy. Relationship 7, that's good. Yeah, I'd have to be a 7 or 8 myself. I'm pretty happy with my relationships. Good, good. Okay, livelihood. How happy are you with your job and your career? Relationship 7, good, Sally, yeah. How happy are you with your job and your career? And if you're watching on the replay, please do write in as well, because I will come back and check in the comments. I'd have to say I'm pretty up there. I'd say I'm an 8 or a 9. I'm always open to opportunities. You never know if things might change, but I'm very happy with what I'm doing. How about you guys? I'm pretty sure Lubna's pretty up there. Oh, that's surprising, Lubna. I thought you'd be higher. Ah, interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And the last one, financial. That might be a bit personal, so if you don't want to share that, I don't mind. I'd have to say I'm probably 4 or a 5 with financial, because I'd really like more money. What do we got here? Okay. Really aren't the same person. 6. Okay, good. Yeah, that's not too bad. We've got some pretty happy, healthy people watching live. Okay, so on this scale of 1 to 10, no, we're not yet. Thank goodness you're not the same person. That would be a bit weird. So on this scale of 1 to 10, I've basically split that into 3 different categories. So in my world, in my kind of program, if you're a 1 to a 4 in that scale of 1 to 10, that's what I call victimhood. So I've got something to you to watch the replays. No worries. Thanks for tuning in this long. So yeah, so 1 to 4, I call that victimhood. Now basically, I'm going to say this, I'm pretty sure that people watching live have heard this before. If you're watching on the replay, maybe you've heard it before, maybe you haven't. But here's the thing. You create your own reality. So that's a big statement. How does that make you feel when you hear that? Because some people, it might be a bit prickly for some people. They might say, well, you know, I didn't make that terrible trauma in my life happen. Or, you know, I didn't mean to drop that iron on my foot last week. It broke my toe. And, you know, I didn't really mean to step out in front of that car that hit me in the road. You know, people have a little bit of a problem with that statement that you create your own reality. But if you're on a scale of 1 to 4 in any of those categories, I would say that that's victimhood, because you think that you're not high up on that scale because of because of other people, because you're thinking that life is happening to you. It's not my fault. Bad things just happen. I'm not making money because people just aren't buying my product because they don't know what they're doing. Or my relationships are bad because my spouse is an idiot and he doesn't listen to what I'm saying. Or, you know, my mum doesn't listen to what I'm saying. These are kind of victimhood scales of those 4 things. If you're on a 5 to a 7, that's pretty good. You're working on it. You're doing the work, you're doing the energy work, you're feeling pretty good about things, and you're in the process of working your way up what the emotional scale, so from wherever you are down below to wherever you need to be. And if you're a 7 or a plus, you're really doing well, because I don't think you can ever really be a 10, because a 10 means that everything's perfect. And I don't think we can ever get to a point in life where everything's perfect. You're always going to be wanting something a little bit more. So getting back to that statement, you create your own reality. How did that feel inside you to think that? Are you absolutely sure? Are you absolutely comfortable with the concept of creating your own reality? Creating your own world around you? Sally and Lubna, how do you feel about that statement? Does it feel comfortable? Does it trigger anything? Does it make you feel a bit, I've heard it, I believe it, but what do you reckon? Totally. I kind of knew you were going to say that. If anybody does find it a bit prickly on the replay, then please do put in the comments. I'd really like to hear from you as well. But I've got a little exercise, because the totally believe that we can. Exactly. The thing is with the human brain is that your brain doesn't know what's real and what's not. And I'll give you a little example of this, a little exercise. Imagine I've got in my hand here a lime. Now we all know what a lime looks like. It's nice and green, smells quite nice, got that nice sort of deep green waxy finish on it. Now just imagine I'm cutting into that lime. You can smell the juice coming out. You know that it's kind of sour. You can't really drink the juice directly because it's sour. And most people will find by now, even that short description, you've got more saliva in your mouth, because you're thinking that the smell and the taste, and that's just such a beautiful smell. And you start to get more saliva in your mouth because your brain doesn't know what's real and what's not. There's no lime here, but your brain is interpreting signals as if there's a lime in my hands. Amazing, isn't it? When you actually start to think about it, the brain doesn't know. It's like I have one in my hands right now. Right, good. And my description was good then. Thank you, Lubna. So I've got something to leave you with in this first episode. I've got an activity for you. Oh, hi, Angie. Oh, you can watch this on the replay. Yummy info. Yeah, it'll make sense when you get to this point, having watched the other bits. So I've got an activity for you. If you're going to join me in the next episodes, then I'd like you to do this activity over the next 7 days, or just, it'll only take a couple of minutes on one day. You can do it every day if you want to, but just once would be fine. And what I'd like you to do is to have a look at those 4 areas that we looked at: the finance, the livelihood, relationships and health. And if there was any aspect there that I think that Lubna and Sally, you were down in a 6, just think about an aspect of one of those areas that you'd like to improve. And I'd like you really to visualise, just for a couple of minutes, the perfect scenario for one of those aspects. So let's say if it's relationship and you're not having too good a relationship with your mum right now, or your partner, or your dog started hating you or something like that, just take a couple of minutes to visualise over the course of the next 7 days the perfect scenario of having a perfect relationship with that person, and really try to get into the feeling of that. How would it feel to really be in that perfect scenario? You know, what would the smells around you be like? What situation would you be like? What would it look like? And really just try to put yourself in that position for a couple of minutes, because the idea there is you're trying to trick your brain into thinking you are really, really in that situation. And the task when you do that is actually just to write down the good feelings that appear from that. So it might be that you get a nice warm fuzzy feeling in your tummy, or maybe your heart starts to beat a little bit quicker, or a smile comes on your face, something like that. Just note down that on your piece of paper that you've got today, and just note down how you feel, because I'd really like to know what comes up for you. Now, if you don't mind sharing, put it in the comments under the video at whatever time in the next 7 days that you do that. And then when we go into episode 2 next week, we can have a quick look at what your answers were to see any feelings that came up. And in the second episode there, we'll start to look at the strategies to really put yourself in those better feeling situations, and to really start moving up in life, to really open up and try and get to terms with that grief and that loss, so that you can deal with it, accept it, and move up the emotional scale, and start to move from grief towards gratitude. So that's it for my first episode. Thank you very much for joining me today, and I will see you again next week at the same time, 2 o'clock British Summer Time on Thursday next week for episode 2. Thank you very much for joining me, and I'll see you then. Bye guys.
I hope that you've enjoyed the show today as much as we've enjoyed making it for you. If you've got anything out of this episode, please do tell someone else how they can subscribe to the Brand Builders TV channel at youtube.com/Brand Builders TV. Why not join us at our next Brand Builders Thinkubator, a global mastermind that we run every week to take away the loneliness of being in business on your own. For more information and to book your place, visit light.brandbuilders.club/Thinkubator. That's light.brandbuilders.club/Thinkubator. Until next time, be the ripple that you wish to see in the world, and we'll see you soon.